Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive with us. Today we're going to be tackling a story that's full of drama and some really, really tough choices.
Oh, yeah.
The fall of King Ahab.
Mm.
And we're going to be looking at excerpts from a book called Prophets, Deceit, and Judgment, The Fall of Ahab and Jezebel's Doom.
Okay.
Now, you might already know the basics of this biblical tale, but we're going to be looking deeper to see what unexpected insights we can find.
Sounds good.
You ready to go beyond the surface?
Absolutely. This story is often, just boiled down to a simple morality tale.
Right.
But when you look closer, it raises some fascinating questions about leadership and faith
Well, yeah, for sure.
and the consequences of our actions.
I think that's what we're all about here, right?
Yeah.
So let's dive into Act 1, God, Kings, and Battles.
Okay.
We're in ancient Israel, and Ahab the king is facing a pretty terrifying enemy. Ben-Hadad, the king of Syria. And this Ben-Hadad is not messing around. He demands everything Ahab has, even his family.
Yeah, it's a classic power move, Yeah. Designed to completely subjugate Ahab and his entire kingdom.
Wow.
But what's interesting here is that despite all of Ahab's flaws, he's given a chance.
By a higher power, I'm guessing?
Exactly. God, speaking through a prophet, promises Ahab victory against this seemingly impossible force, not only once, but twice.
Wow.
Imagine the odds stacked against them, and yet they emerge victorious. This divine intervention really speaks to this concept that was central to the ancient Israelites' understanding of the world. This idea that God could and would intervene in human affairs.
So it's kind of a David and Goliath situation, but with a whole army instead of just one giant.
Yeah, you could say that.
It really underscores that idea that even when things seem totally hopeless,
Yeah.
there might be unexpected help.
Precisely. But here's where things take a turn.
Oh.
Instead of following God's instructions to completely destroy Ben-Hadad, Ahab makes a deal with him.
Interesting.
It might seem like an act of mercy or pragmatism, but this one decision sets off a chain of events with some pretty heavy consequences.
It's a classic case of winning the battle.
Yeah.
But maybe losing the war.
Yeah. And it raises an important question.
Okay.
Are we truly in control of our destinies? Or do our choices, even those made with good intentions, have unintended consequences that ripple far beyond our immediate grasp?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think that's something that we're going to be looking at throughout this whole story.
Yeah.
So Act 1 ends with Ahab winning these massive victories, but also making a decision that might come back to bite him. This makes me wonder what's waiting for him in Act 2. Is this where Jezebel enters the picture?
You're right on the money. Act 2 shifts our focus from the battlefield to something much more personal, a vineyard.
Okay.
And yes, this is where we meet Jezebel, Ahab's queen.
Now, I know the name Jezebel has a certain reputation even today. What can you tell me about the woman behind that infamous name?
It's interesting how Jezebel has become almost like a cultural shorthand.
Right.
For a certain type of woman, manipulative, ambitious, maybe
Yeah.
even dangerous. But to really understand her role in this story, we need to look past those stereotypes.
Okay, so let's dig a little deeper. What's her part in this whole saga?
Well, Ahab sets his sights on this beautiful vineyard owned by a man named Naboth.
Okay.
Now, in ancient Israel, land ownership wasn't just about wealth. It was tied to family history, inheritance, and even religious identity.
So there's more at stake here than just a piece of property.
Exactly. And Naboth, upholding this tradition, refuses to sell his ancestral land to Ahab. This sends Ahab into a sulk, which honestly is kind of surprising for a king who just conquered 2 armies.
Maybe all that conquering didn't quite satisfy his desire for more.
Perhaps, but it's Jezebel who takes center stage here.
Okay.
Seeing her husband's frustration, she comes up with a plan to get him what he wants.
Oh.
And her solution is, well, chilling, to say the least.
I have a feeling this is where things take a dark turn.
Jezebel, using her authority as queen, orchestrates a plot to frame Naboth for blasphemy, a very serious charge in those times. Through false witnesses and manipulated accusations, she engineers his public execution by stoning.
That's brutal. It really highlights the lengths she's willing to go to achieve her goals and the potential for power to corrupt, even in the name of love or loyalty.
It's a stark reminder that power, especially when wielded without ethical constraints, can lead to terrible injustice.
But actions have consequences, right?
Yeah.
There has to be some kind of reckoning for this.
You're absolutely right. And that's where Elijah the prophet comes back into the picture.
Okay.
He confronts Ahab and Jezebel, delivering a prophecy that's just as chilling as Jezebel's actions. He foretells their violent deaths, mirroring the violence they inflicted upon Naboth.
Wow.
He even prophesies that dogs will lick Ahab's blood in the very place where Naboth was killed.
That's intense. It's like the vineyard itself becomes a symbol of their greed and the consequences that are coming for them. It makes you think about how our actions can create ripples that extend far beyond ourselves.
It's a powerful image, and it connects to a concept that resonates even today, the idea of karma or reaping what you sow.
Right.
This part of the story leaves us at a point of high tension with this chilling prophecy hanging over Ahab and Jezebel.
So Act 2 ends with a sense of impending doom. What happens in Act 3? Does Ahab heed the warning, or does he continue down this path of destruction? Okay, Act 3, the final chapter in Ahab's story. We've got a king facing a pretty grim prophecy, a power-hungry queen, and a prophet who isn't afraid to speak truth to power. So what happens next?
Well, 3 years pass after that prophecy, and it seems like Ahab might have forgotten about it completely.
Oh, wow.
He decides to go to war yet again, this time against Syria, the very kingdom he made a pact with earlier.
You'd think he'd have learned his lesson by now, but it seems like some people never change.
Perhaps he felt emboldened by his past victories, or maybe he just couldn't resist that allure of power and conquest.
Right.
However, this time he decides to at least consult God before charging into battle.
That's good at least, right?
He assembles this massive group of prophets, 400 of them,
400.
to seek divine guidance.
Wow, that's a lot of voices. Did they all agree on what Ahab should do?
Oh, they were unanimous. Every single one of them assured Ahab of a resounding victory.
Okay.
They told him exactly what he wanted to hear.
That sounds a little too convenient. Was anyone skeptical?
Well, luckily, Ahab wasn't going into this alone. He had formed an alliance with Jehoshaphat, the king of Judah.
Okay.
Now, Jehoshaphat was a different kind of leader, more cautious, more discerning. He wasn't satisfied with this chorus of yes men, so he insisted on hearing from another prophet, one known for his honesty, even if it wasn't what people wanted to hear.
Ah, so this is where things get interesting. Who was this truth teller?
His name was Micaiah, and he was known for speaking truth to power no matter the consequences. Reluctantly, Ahab summoned him, probably expecting more of those same assurances.
Right.
But Micaiah delivered a very different message.
Oh.
He predicted defeat, disaster, and even Ahab's death on the battlefield.
Oh,
He even described this vision where God allowed a lying spirit to deceive those 400 prophets.
That's a pretty bold claim. How did Ahab react to this?
Well, Ahab, furious and unwilling to face the truth, threw Micaiah in prison and marched off to war anyway,
He didn't listen.
completely ignoring the warning.
Wow.
He even went so far as to disguise himself on the battlefield,
Right.
hoping to evade the fate Micaiah had foretold.
It sounds like he was trying to outsmart destiny itself. But you can't really escape the consequences of your actions, can you?
Exactly. Despite his attempts to defy the prophecy, Ahab met a tragic end.
Oh, no.
During the battle, a random arrow fired from who knows where struck him, and he bled to death in his chariot. The prophecy was fulfilled, proving that even a king couldn't escape the consequences of his choices.
So after all the battles and the power struggles, the betrayals and the ignored warnings, Ahab's story ends in tragedy. What can we take away from this ancient tale? What does it tell us about leadership and faith and the choices we make?
Well, Ahab's story is a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked ambition and the importance of seeking truth, and the reality that our choices do have consequences.
Yeah.
It reminds us that true leadership requires listening to diverse perspectives, even those that challenge our assumptions.
I think that's really important.
Yeah, it also highlights the danger of surrounding ourselves with people who only tell us what we want to hear.
That's so true. It's a powerful message that resonates even today. You know, we're often faced with difficult choices, and it's easy to fall into that trap of ignoring warnings or surrounding ourselves with yes men.
Right.
But Ahab's story reminds us that the truth, however uncomfortable it might be, is always worth seeking out.
It also makes you think about the nature of power and how easily it can be misused.
Yeah, for sure.
Jezebel's actions, while motivated by love for her husband, ultimately led to injustice and tragedy.
Right.
It's a reminder that power without ethical boundaries can be incredibly destructive.
This deep dive has been a whirlwind of emotions. From battlefield victories to a vineyard's curse. From false prophets to a king's tragic end. This story really makes you think. It reminds us that even in the face of power and temptation, our choices ultimately determine our fate.
And it encourages us to consider the voices we choose to listen to.
Yes.
Are we seeking out diverse perspectives and challenging our own assumptions?
Right.
Or are we only listening to those who tell us what we want to hear?
That's a great question, and one that I think we can all ask ourselves. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the fall of Ahab. It's a story that has much to teach us about leadership and faith and the enduring power of choice.